months now. And we've built a suite of decentralized applications we call the DAO suite. And each of the components of that DAO suite do a little something that DAOs need to burst into existence and have a sustainable future. So we built each of these things. We've been like throwing them out we've built them with the community over the last 18 months. There's a kind of interaction between a development team and a community who test the apps live. And it's just been one big 18-month crypto economic experiment, I think you would say. But yeah, we're in a process of going to launching as a coherent suite, as a DAO suite. So we're having root and branch conversations about who we are, what's our direction, what are we aiming for, all that sort of stuff. Exciting time.
Yeah, it was a big conversation, and we packed a lot in a short period of time. I don't know if you wanted to continue on the same conversation here. We can just put it out there.
I'm super sorry, I can't really talk right now, but I just wanted to make, because I'm cycling, but I just wanted to make one point what we could talk about to make it a bit more open, because people who just drop in might not be interested in our branding meeting.
Yeah,
what could be interesting is actually to talk about messaging, DAOs, and decentralization in general.
Yeah, like I think that's a big part of the conversation. So we think we're building the sort of next generation of DAOs. Invite some more people by tweeting this out. But I think, yeah, I'm going to invite people to join us to discuss the next generation of DAOs.
Nice.
Because that's what it's about. So as part of this conversation, explaining to our quite a few new community members what the kind of philosophy behind the apps are. So we've built apps that launch fungible tokens, launch non-fungible tokens. So we've got an app called Auction, which is for starting off fungible token ecosystems. We've got Mint for launching non-fungible tokens, and it's a kind of really nicely designed minting platform which solves quite a few problems in the minting space. And we've got this whole governance ecosystem which is all built on voting. So we've got we specialize in quadratic voting, decentralized decision making, and it's my belief that what we've got is what DAOs need. There's a point, the kind of DAO thinking that's happened up to this point, and then there's the new thing that we're building, which is substantially different, I think.
To Ksenia's point there, I suppose this is a question for the listeners and anyone who's engaged in this conversation with us. What do you think is the most effective communication of decentralized governance in DAOs that you've seen outside of us? What do you think, Nick? What have you seen that is the most effective communication of it?
So I don't think we've seen any good DAO governance yet at all. There has been none. So that's a kind of answer to that question. But there has been very interesting bits that have happened in the sort of governance journey, if you like. So remember the DAO idea, which is like I got sucked down the rabbit hole on DAOs in 2016 when the first one happened. So at the time I was building decentralized governance systems for centralized institutions. So I was an associate dean and a director level academic in a university, designing ways to coordinate people in a decentralized way. Universities are like very hierarchical, right? You've got like your vice chancellor at the top, then the deans, then the underlings like me, and then all the academics, and then the students, like a pyramid. And everything's ultra bureaucratic. So my disdain for bureaucracy is because I did it at the coalface for 10 years, designing policy and infrastructure for institutions. And DAOs have this opportunity to be not that, right? There's no ultra hierarchy. There's no chain of command as such. It's a much more open, decentralized structure. So I was figuring out how you herd academics to collaborate with one another. How do you get people to work together to create new stuff, new ideas, better ways for doing things? And at the same time, the DAO launched and exploded. So when the first the DAO, that's the beginning of the first generation of DAOs, I would say, which is this idea that these very sort of governance minimized structures where people essentially pool assets and decide how to spend them. So it's a smart contract that you put money in, vote on what you want to do, what do you want you to spend your money on. There's some kind of vote, and the funds are distributed. And people got lost in this idea that the A in DAOs is automated, not autonomous. We got stuck in this governance minimization paradigm where decentralization just means automated software. You get rid of the humans as much as possible. Whereas the way I saw it was actually you want to get as many humans as possible involved in DAOs rather than eliminate them and make it all a kind of automated, like an AI running it, like a automated machine. And some DAOs should end up as that. Like Curve is probably the DAO I'm most interested in at the moment, because it's trended to a governance minimized design where pure crypto economics drives the governance, which is exceptionally interesting. And that's very much like peak that model of DAO so far. You could probably argue Bitcoin is a better example of DAO, but it's about this governance minimization idea. The next iteration will just be a community working together. So to do that, you need to build all the mechanisms that people need to be able to collaborate in a decentralized space. So we've now got the opportunity to, instead of, okay, we can pool a load of money and decide how to spend it, but we can also build something together and share the assets that we've created. We can mint our own money now. We can make our own money printers. We can mint our own money. So you use this money as a kind of tool to describe who has built this and who has contributed to it. And you can either contribute to it financially, like I don't want to get involved in building all this stuff. I just want to see what you guys get up to. I'll throw in 10K into the pot. You guys use it. I'll vote and give you my steer. And then there's active people who get deeply involved in the governance, turn up to the community calls, do work together collaboratively. That's where I think DAOs are going to find their next major upgrade, if you like, which is when you have thousands of people all working on the same thing together. And it's our vision that, so I jokingly say I want to see 1,000 DAOs a day. But I do, because DAO just then turns into a group of people who want to do something cool together and are launching it. There's people contributing to it and giving it a chance of success. So that's the kind of future I think we're aiming for. And sorry, I didn't really ask which governance that I like the most, but it's a slightly different answer. We've got our hands up.
It's like a double-edged question. Yeah, so I bought Brew Eat Up upstairs. Shout out to the Sketchy Apes. But yeah, so it's a double-edged question. It was like, who do you think is doing good governance? But then who do you think is doing good messaging around governance? Who's talking about what they're doing the best? I'll come to you in a second, Brew. No worries.
That's an interesting question as well. Because no one's really selling governance yet, because no one really cares about governance yet. It's like the most important thing in crypto, but people don't get it yet. So there's no one really selling governance as the thing. There's some examples like, so I'd say MakerDAO make a big deal about their decentralized governance. And that's one of the most, MakerDAO is probably one of peak DAO at the moment, probably. DAI is an exceptionally important component of this ecosystem, and I'm desperately happy it exists. So, and it's well managed. They've just retired their foundation. They've really done DAO to a kind of advanced level. I would say they've decentralized an organization which does a decentralized stablecoin. Exceptional thing it is. And then there's like Curve, which is interesting, but they sell that as a governance thing. I think the Curve wars are a good example of how governance has been sold effectively. This narrative of the Curve wars, and that's DAO governance using essentially staking crypto economics. But yeah, not really many people actually selling it, which again is why we found it difficult to break out. Is our lead as we were the consensus layer for DeFi for ages. I think it still says that on a website. People don't realize that they need governance yet.
What I'll do is, Brew, if you have a question, if you want to go ahead, mate.
Yeah, thank you. And before I start, I want to say I have to go to a meeting in 15 minutes, but I definitely wanted to say a few things because I've been looking into DAOs and I'm new to the space, and I checked out Gitcoin DAO and I checked out a developer DAO, and they have some interesting ways that they're setting things up as far as creating a repository for information. And so what I want to add to this is that I've been a business analyst for years. And when I see the decentralized autonomous like organization try to lift off, I see like immediately pain points, which I hear everyone touching on, which is great. But it's the information architecture of websites, the ability to create processes for people, to create like different levels of effort for involvement, to even create like onboarding documents, to be able to get, because we're talking about thousands of people entering these DAOs, like to be able to get somebody from point A to point B like rather quickly without having to have too much friction. A lot of the efficiencies and the information architecture and the things that need to be in place for a mass amount of people to work together to actually get the full effect of power in numbers isn't there yet with a lot of these DAOs. And I just see this as a business analyst. I'm waiting around in the space and being like, this is everything's so nebulous right now, and you can see it forming, but I'm very excited for the future of DAOs. And I just wanted to say, I love hearing these conversations because it feels things pick up from this discourse to help elevate and enhance the abilities of DAOs. So thank you to everyone.
Man, it's wonderful. Thank you. Like, you absolutely spot on. So we're not the only people thinking about this next generation of DAOs, which is like this massified workspace almost with like a shared ownership concept. Gitcoin are huge leaders in the space. I absolutely love everything about that project. I'm so happy that the Ethereum ecosystem has a public goods narrative that's a really strong public goods narrative. Like we're doing a DAO, we're going to launch a DAO called Tribes DAO, which has a kind of public goods angle to it, and we want to contribute to that as well. But you're absolutely right. The reality of organizing people is this like pain of like somehow filtering a lot of people trying to do all this work and organizing it into a coherent point. So information architecture is absolutely crucial. Perhaps one of the most important things is like tracking contribution over time. So we do this in a number of ways. We specialize in kind of quadratic voting, which is why I have a little voting squared symbol next to my name, and a few others do. And basically what this allows you to do is to get sorted preference lists. So what should we do as a DAO? So it all starts with an initial conversation, right? It's what do we want to talk about? What's important to us as a collective group of people? We use like semantic tags where you can what's important to us, community. It might be one of our dApps, say yield.vote or something like that. And you sort that list by preference because everyone has an NFT as a kind of voting identity. And the NFT has a budget of voice credits attached to it, which allows you to sort these lists. And then we get aggregated lists. And we find these kind of sorted preference dynamics, which allows you to then say, okay, and each time someone votes, they can say why they voted that way. And it's designed to be a kind of collective intelligence harvesting system. It's like a funnel. The first layer of funnel is like soft signaling, rough consensus, if you want to call it that. And then the next layer is let's actually do some work and create some ideas or let's create around the signal that the DAO has said that it wants. So we built like a thing that's like Snapshot. We built our own off-chain voting architecture that's specifically for NFT governance, which we think they just make more sense as fungible token governance, NFTs, because you can use them for quadratic voting and do reputation systems and create mini DAOs and all these other sorts of bits. So the next stage of the problem is the governance architecture. So if you're designing an organization, you first build these kind of like slightly departmentalized structures where you just cluster people in domains of work and give them specific jobs to do, set them some targets, give them some money, build the mechanisms for them to submit suggestions and it be tested on chain. So we've got a mini DAO called Data DAO. And we're just going to launch tomorrow a way for on-chain attestations in the same way that there's like off-chain votes, which is just some metadata. You sign with your private key that this is the state of my vote. You can collect all sorts of off-chain data. We're going to collect essays and things like that. And then build in voting systems to which of these 10 essays, which of these 10 memes, which of these 10 tweets. Decentralized working is much more about capturing and filtering rather than managing. So it's like in a traditional hierarchical organization, you get departmentalized and someone gets put in charge of you in a position of power. It makes you do your job. And if you don't do your job effectively, they can just kick you out of the game. Whereas DAOs are totally different. It's a different paradigm. You turn up and you contribute. And for me, the kind of this consensus sorting game is the best route into it. That makes sense, Brew. Sorry, it's a bit rambling. I think he might have gone to his meeting.
Maybe. I was going to say, because...
No, yeah, that makes sense.
Cool, because if you're around later on, we're going to be in the Sketchy Apes Discord doing an introduction to DAOs at 9:30 UTC, by the way. So if you have more questions, maybe that's a good time for you to come in a bit deeper.
Yeah, I always forget what UTC to East Coast time is. So hopefully I can make it.
No idea. Yeah,
it's somewhere in the time mist.
Yeah,
we'll be back on later.
I'll definitely be there. Like right now, I do this stuff in between work meetings. I've got a lot of meetings today, but if I have space, you better believe I'll be there. And if not, then I'll reach out and talk to you all about this later. But it was great being here. I'm going to drop off.
Nice one, Brew.
Cheers, Brew. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to put your hand up.
Open it up. If anyone any questions about DAOs, I'll take it anywhere.
I don't think you mean quite like that, do you? But I think one of the things. So what you just said there, I totally get it. I'm down the rabbit hole. I'm right there with you. You know, we're through the portal. A lot of people aren't yet. And there's this cognitive gap that needs to be like closed, and you need to take on a certain amount of information for it to all kind of start to begin to make sense. If you were someone in the audience, for example, now listening, where would you recommend that they start?
That's a good question again. You can start anywhere in crypto. Eventually you end up at DAOs, I think, is basically the way I look at it. Is you can come in via dog tokens, just get involved in crypto. And okay, it's different layers of the adoption funnel. So there's people who are just never. There's now a group of people who just hate crypto ideologically, right? They are anti-crypto, anti-NFT. They're out of the adoption curve. There's nothing you can do for them. Like they think it's boiling the oceans and some kind of ultra-capitalists like hellscape thing that we're working on, and they're just not. They're never going to touch it. So forget them. You would call them laggards in the kind of adoption thing. There's people who are like just next to us that I think are the best people to reach. I think anyone who's in the NFT space could easily fall into the DAO space this year, because every NFT can be a vote in a DAO. So NFTA here is a stoner cat and can vote in they're creating a DAO using our technology, and it's called Metawood Studios, and they're going to get involved in the curation of that cartoon, and it's just an exceptionally cool project. So NFTs are the target market, I think, for us, because they make better governance systems, and the power of collective intelligence and collective working and being on the same wavelength and sharing vibes and enjoying talking to each other and everything. I think it's like a cultural movement, because
it's not just about money movement. Yeah,
it's a cultural movement.
I also have big hopes for this.
Yeah, and so I think we get people excited about it by giving it to them. I think it's like the only way you can experience. It's like an experiential problem rather than a kind of like I've been an academic for 20 years and learned all sorts of stuff across many different disciplines. You only really understand DAOs when you start doing it. It's not something you can learn in theory. So I think we just start giving votes to people with NFTs and launch NFTs and get really deep into NFT governance and NFT DAOs. Some might want tokens eventually, but I'm just feeling like it could be the end. Like no one talked about NFTs a year ago. This time last year, NFTs were practically dead. And now everyone in the world is talking about them. We could be in exactly the same position this time next year with DAOs.
Yeah, 100%. I brought two people up on stage talking to NFTs. I brought NFT. If you want to go first, and then we'll hand over to Rowan after that.
Excellent. Thanks so much for having me up. Thank you, Dr. Nick and Front and finance.vote for hosting this space. I thought of a question while I was listening, which is usually a great thing, unless I forget it halfway through. So my question was, Dr. Nick, you said you'll take it anywhere. What is the biggest hurdle you see potentially, you can choose globally or in a sector of the world that you feel most comfortable speaking on. What's the biggest challenge you see combining the current state of governance with the DAO governance? Future talk of what's a hurdle that you think is going to be? How do we get the world we're in now and the people that have that power, that legal holding, how do we mash it with them? Because it sounds like we're going to be like, hey, everybody, we got this great idea to make people govern themselves, and it's going to be awesome. And then I don't know the world governments are going to like that. So it might be a tough one.
That's what people want to talk about. All right. I think this is like talk to our government in exactly this way. This is the thing. You'll find a lot of people in crypto are like, yeah, fuck the government. This is taken down. It's all dollars going to bog roll and good. We can't survive without our current governance structures. It's like you collapse governments, it's the apocalypse. Like you don't want to bring down the government. It's a bad idea. You reform the government, and you reform the government by showing the governments are like, think of hierarchical organizations like ships. The bigger the ship, the slower they turn. So think of a small speedboat and a cruise liner, one of those mega things where you get 15,000 people on it. Like they cannot turn like a speedboat can turn. It's exactly the same thing with those governments. So they're not going to like radically change the way that they're doing shit anytime soon. It's just going to continue to be a shit show. And the reason why it's a shit show is because they can't turn quick enough. So when you have a pandemic, for example, where everyone like, shit, we better take a hard right turn here. We don't do that because it's not the way governments work. They don't have the agility as organizations. Now, DAOs are ultra agile organizations. We've steered radically all over the place to create 7 dApps in a year. I think we've produced more technology than perhaps like any conventional startup could dream of doing, because we've just been spending money in crypto and bribing people to build technology for us. Do you know what I mean? It's like we're bribing people to make memes for us and talk about us, and it's just a totally different game. So what will happen is that new modes of governance will emerge that prove this agility out in real practice. And this is one of our goals, right? This is what I want to prove what DAOs can do. And that's kind of part of what we're doing at finance.vote. And the next step is like so we're going to launch 7 DAOs in 7 days, in 12 weeks, we hope. And we're going to launch like 7 DAOs in 7 days. They're going to be launched into existence, who each have their own capability of showing the world what DAOs can do. And then we just keep doing that, and we just keep pumping them out, and we show people how it's done. And we can say, we can make better decisions here. We can work together as a group. We can reach consensus. We can build stuff out of thin air. And there's just like, conventional governance structures will have to start integrating it. So the next step is like hybrid organizations in the corporate world, where someone like Microsoft might have a Microsoft DAO, where they've got decentralized workers working in this agile way with their own autonomous budget, but ultimately under the larger governance structure of Microsoft. And then governments will do it because they have to.
And just to like spit on that as well, I think of it like a DAO probably isn't going to replace a nation state, but there's no reason to think that a DAO couldn't be the same size as Apple
because
in the future.
Let's go a bit deeper on going there. What there is like legacy power structures, you might call it, right? So there's power, which is what we essentially cede ourselves to. If we are a citizen, if we are a subject of that nation, right? So if we're a subject, it means you basically have to do what the nation tells you to do, because otherwise they'll kick you out or throw you in jail or whatever. You are complying by existing in a nation state to a nation state's rules and laws. And the way that system is governed in some cases is remarkably efficient through a kind of evolutionary design that's happened over hundreds of years. And in some cases, it's just full of like inefficient and legacy behavior. Some of that comes down to the actual people within. So in the UK, everyone who's in the cabinet has been to like Eton. They're from big old money. You know what I mean? It's like if you're in power in the UK, it's because you've come from money. And so that's like a legacy power structure, a kind of a thing that you can't disrupt with DAOs. Then you're talking like actually maybe you can, because the reason why they outperform is because like Boris Johnson's about to be cancelled as our UK Prime Minister over a cheese and wine party. That's how utterly stupid this is. We're squabbling about cheese and wine when we're in the middle of a global crisis. It's just utterly ridiculous. So it's because we've got these buffoons in governments who, like, you take Liz Truss, who might be the next one on. Liz Truss has done. I met her when she was the head of Secretary of State for Education, lower years, like primary school education. I was an educationalist. I'd go to these conferences, and she didn't have a clue about education. I'd been studying it for 10 years. Didn't know anything about pedagogy or like organizational design or like governance of educational policy. She just had no idea. She was just and then she went on to agriculture, and then she was Treasury Secretary for a bit, and I think like now she's some kind of equality division. That makes no sense. You don't govern by just moving people around into disciplinary bases that they don't know anything about. So the problem with conventional governance is that the power is located around people who don't have the knowledge, the domain-specific knowledge, to effectively govern that structure. So you now are in a situation where you've just got the wrong people in the wrong places. So at the peak of a pyramid that doesn't move, the power locates around the top, and they don't want anyone from below to come up who are obviously better. Like, you don't want like some guy who's researched like educational theory for 20 years to come and take your place. So you have structures that mitigate against that level of disruption. And that's the problem with essentially governments and hierarchical power, and that's what needs to be reformed. I got deep then, sorry.
No, that's good. Good answer.
Yeah, I have a question about DAOs, and actually my question formulated before Dr. Nick just said what he said. And so if it's okay, I'd like to comment on that as well.
Please, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I've witnessed it in corporate America. They talk about efficiency is the goal, but then I've experienced literally exactly what Dr. Nick just talked about, where I know I had better ideas, or I knew of a better idea that wasn't mine, but the powers that be, it wasn't about efficiency. It was about keeping the structure in place and staying safe, because in the real world is all about risk assessment. And so in their minds, anybody outside of the circle is a risk, because we don't know what your real goal is. Whereas those that are in the circle already, it's already known that money is their driver, money and power. So that's an easy formula. If you want to either collaborate with them or manipulate them or whatever, that's pretty simple. But efficiency, I see the DAO as definitely a way of making sure that efficiency comes first. And then there's various aspects of our lives. Some efficiency definitely should be the priority, which the DAO actually, I think, promotes. There may be some exceptions where efficiency isn't necessarily the best variable to focus on.
And this is a really interesting direction. I just interject a second, because like what we're talking about, there's like, when you get back into, I don't want to get too into governance theory, but it has its legacy. The corporate structure emerged from, it was like the Industrial Revolution. It was all a bit of a mess, didn't really have structured governance. And then you get into stuff where you develop production lines. And, you know, this happened in like the 40s, 50s, and they call it the Anthropomorphine, I think is the word. It's like this explosion of human growth happened, and it was mainly due to the notion of efficiency in governance design. And it came through there's like a thing called Taylorist governance design, which is you measure people and their efficiency, and then you can almost treat it like an experiment, like a scientific experiment. So the classic example is people shoveling coal. There's an optimal spade size that gets the most coal moved. So that the shovel head, if the shovel head's too big, then the guy lifting it can't lift it. It's too heavy. If it's too small, he's not moving enough coal. And there's like a graph you can draw where you can find the absolute optimum, which gets the maximum amount of work out of that guy for the lowest cost. And that exact thing is the exact governance paradigm of basically all corporate organizations, all profit-making organizations.
Yeah, I wanted to also say about this efficiency, we should not forget that, like, after all, they're decentralized. They're not called efficient autonomous organizations. They might be not efficient. Yeah,
and so the kind of efficiency thing and DAOs. So I'm just trying to get how they're different, because there's a lot of people like, how are DAOs different than companies? And the pyramid like management architecture that is designed to get the maximum amount of work out of someone for the minimal cost, which by the way is basically law. If you're a public company, you have to maximize the profit for your shareholders, which means basically anyone inside the organization has got to work for as cheap as possible and get the most output as possible. That's if you like waste money like doing stuff that isn't that, then they can sue you. So DAOs aren't that, right? They're just not this. It's not about top-down efficiency. It's about bottom-up growth. It's about figuring out to get it's the inverse organizational structure. They're emergent. It's not that there's company goals and we're going to crush everyone to get them. It's a space where people decide what they're doing together and emerge together to do whatever they want.
I think it's like one of the, like, if we're talking about properties, like we're talking about, for instance, decentralization, efficiency, maybe resilience. Nick, you mentioned something like something extremely adaptable, right? So
Yes.
that's a part of resilience, but like resilience and adaptability in hostile environment, and then there is maybe fluidity, or I don't know how to.
Yeah, you're right. It's
an ability
agility.
to change. Agility. That's it. So there are all these properties, and I think the super property, the meta property that sits on top of all of it, is maybe the ability to dial down and up all these properties. Like one day you want to be efficient and less decentralized, and you can do it by consensus. One day you become more agile and less efficient, or something like this, and so on. Yeah, it's almost, if I'm thinking about the meta property of all, we can dial down and up all these properties by consensus.
Yes,
something like that.
And that's what I was touching on when I was talking about the efficiency. There are some cases where that's not the best way forward, and you just hit on it directly, that with the DAO and everybody participating, then there can be a consensus, and we can move forward based on what the consensus says, as opposed to focusing on the efficiency of money, because that just sucks. That
even defining the word efficiency. And I'm thinking, this is why I'm like so hooked on this. When I discovered this semantic governance thing, I was like, holy shit, defining the words we're talking about should be a part of the governance process, because otherwise we'll get painted into the corner of discussing nothing, because we just pervert words all the time. So if we want to govern, we need to read exactly. So we have to be on top of semantics if we want to do decentralized governance on a really large scale.
So let me just explain a couple of things that were talked about then. You're absolutely right, Rohan. Social consensus is the key to all this. And that's one of the key different paradigms. If you're at the bottom of rung of an organization, you don't have any say over the steer of the organization. It's just there's no information that flows up from the lower tiers of it up to the top. No one has a voice. That's fundamentally what's different. And that's why we focus on voting technology. That's why we're called finance.vote, because exactly that social consensus is the root to all of it. If you don't have a voice in a DAO, then it's not a functioning one. You should at least have a voice. There's scales of power within it where people have different control. The hierarchy is something you can't get rid of. It's like, as much as what I've described as the problems of hierarchies, there's necessarily people within an organization who understand more than others, right? There's like, most of this is emerged from my synapses into a few enough people that's turned it into technology. So there's definitely a different asymmetry in talent, skill, knowledge, contextual understanding, whatever. Some degree of hierarchy always exists. So we have a hierarchy where there's different layers. So our token holders are in a layer, ID holders, NFT holders are in a layer. We're going to open up something called the Palm soon, which is like a literally a parliamentary governance system. And yeah, they will have tiers of power. So you can't get away from it. But it's about creating these fluid structures whereby if anyone's at the top that shouldn't be there or stops doing anything, they naturally drop out of the game. Like the only way that you stay at the top is if you keep participating and keep contributing to it. Oh, sorry, Matt, go on.
No, I was going to say, I just think hierarchies are just natural in nature. They just exist everywhere. So you can't try to design them out of the system because it will fail.
So there's things that have happened in things like communes where people are like, we don't have hierarchies. We're all on the same level. We're all one family. And then what happens is there's always people in that large family that assume a position of power through whatever dominant. They might just be taller, or they might just be louder, or they might just have a certain disposition, or they might have more money or something. It always emerges, and they call it, and in fact it makes things explode eventually. They call it the tyranny of structurelessness. And what happens when you fall back to this kind of law of the jungle where the strongest take power, and you end up with almost like warlord dynamics in the group. So just a DAO example might be like some influencer comes in, everyone loves, who just takes over. And if you've got no power structure, that's possible.
Kind of says what happened to Bitcoin with Elon Musk. NFT, were you going to say something?
I kind of had a summary of my understanding from asking Dr. Nick the tough question. So I was thinking potentially what we could start to aim towards is this like symbiotic relationship between the legacy governance systems and those more agile DAO systems. That sounds what I took from that. And I think to the importance of the hierarchy building in that as humans, we should or could, not should, I'm not an expert to say should, could be governing on a more three-dimensional scale and level and build and structure instead of the traditional methods.
Much more succinct than what I said. But yeah, I think there's hybrid structures are going to, I think that's where it's just going to be like, it's going to have to show people how it's done. So yeah, we need more people getting involved in DAOs and figuring it out. We don't have all the answers. No one has all the answers. So it is wide open. I think one thing I will say is I've spent many years, I studied physics for 10 years, and you end up at the end of a sort of branch of knowledge where it's been like mined away by all the people around you, like many years of people have been working away at these things. You get to this ultra specificity, like you go right down to the edge where until you get to the point where no one's done anything. And no one's done anything there because you're the person there, but it's all because it's super. The DAO space at the moment is like the opposite. It's every now and again you get to one of these trees and a new branch will open up, and there's a whole design space. There's a whole load of world of new knowledge and new things and just new everything because it's a new tool set that's opened up and a new, like, design space is the right way to put it. And this is for someone who's like works in knowledge work. This is like the best thing that could possibly happen. It's like no one's here, but there's loads to do. You can do anything in the DAO space in the next 5 years and you'll be a world expert on it because you were the first there. So if you want to future in Web3 or crypto or DeFi or I don't know, this whole movement, just get involved. Just being around it. I think people need to move away past the token speculation elements of it a little bit and get more into what it's about actually. Like, what's the point of this technology? Where's it going? Yeah, you might make some money out of it. And if you spend 5 years in Web3 and get some money into it, you probably will. But that shouldn't be your driver. Come in to learn and think in 5 years' time, I'm going to know more about this aspect of Web3 than anyone else.
Yeah, I totally dig into that. And sorry, Zebu's requested to come in at 2.6. Yeah, I just think hanging around in like Discord conversations, or Zebu's having a problem there, hanging around Discord conversations, hanging around in Twitter spaces, it just automatically upgrades your thinking. Because
so there's like a degree of learning that comes from just in the learning theory terms, it's like they call it legitimate peripheral participation, lurking, essentially. You do learn like that a lot. You absorb stuff over time just by immersing yourself into a group of people who know what they're talking about, and you might not. You'll just absorb loads of new knowledge. But there's if you get involved, it's an entirely different game. It's you learn, it's like non-linearly better. So the more you get involved, the more rapidly you will learn new things because you'll be immersed in the context in a deeper way. So good DAOs will have lots of, so we've been working on this for weeks and months even. It's like, how do we create this kind of layer of things that people can come in and do, which is the very lightweight engagements, just tipping people over the edge from being lurkers to being engaged in a DAO, and then build a funnel for them to get deeper and deeper in it. And that just creates more and more opportunities. And they should get paid for doing this as well. And eventually they might get to the point where they've got enough crypto that they can leave their job and jump into DAOs full time.
I'd say they shouldn't just be paid. They should just they should eventually get budgets to do
I think
stuff.
that they should be flowed.
And then maybe pay themselves.
Well, I think it's about, this is why we built Bank, right? To flow the network assets out to people. So let's say you start a DAO and you sell 20% of the tokens, and then there's 80% of them left. If you get paid in that 80% whilst you're building the DAO, and the DAO does well, everyone who's been involved in that DAO is holding the network assets, right? Down from picking up a few for making memes to picking up millions for working full time. And then if that DAO succeeds, it finds a market. There's Olympus DAO got to $3 billion markets, and that was basically a automated Ponzi scheme. So when we get to DAOs that are like actual cultural movements and people have collaborated in them and built something important, there'll be a lot of people who will be able to just leave and do DAOs full time. I hope that happens this year.
I'm thinking actually the only DAOs that will succeed is the DAOs that manage to distribute tokens to people who do stuff for them, not just buy tokens. Because it creates a different relationship. If you cannot earn these tokens, then eventually these DAOs will not create this social cohesion.
You have to distribute the assets to the people who've been there, like down to the point where, so we've got part of our airdrop is for people who turn up to our call. We call them synchronizers. People just turn up to the calls and you don't have to say anything. You're in our airdrop. And then it goes from like doing work to introducing new DAOs to us and so on. So there's going to be, and we're going to do this every quarter we've got 4 years or 5 years of tokens to be able to give away tokens to people for doing work for us over a period of time. So what you don't want is the game to end because everyone got the tokens initially. And too small a group of people control. If the token price does go up, then just like a handful of people get rich instead of like hundreds or thousands. So it needs to have a token emission that lasts for years. And most of the DAOs at the moment have thought very short term. It's just all about the launch and a hype pump, and it's game over pretty quickly.
Actually, the crypto itself, like the whole space will succeed only if there are ways to distribute the tokens to people who did stuff versus people who bought the tokens, because that's the only way, I think, to end this sort of vulture capital dump race. Because if people invest time, they're less likely to then go out and dump, even though some
That's
people
true.
would.
I think the way to look at it is like buying your way in is how you gain exposure to what that group of people are going to do in the future. So if you think this DAO is super cool, they're going to create some cool NFTs or they're going to do something really culturally important, by buying the token, you're increasing the price of the treasury that they hold. So you're buying it because you want a slice of it, but you're also contributing to the DAO. You're buying into the DAO by buying the token. So this is a kind of non-zero sum game dynamic where people are essentially buying this token, which makes the treasury more valuable, which makes the DAO more likely to do stuff, which makes the token price go up, which makes more people buy it, and so on. I think we'll see a good DAO launch means that everyone who's been involved in it shares the upside of adoption of that DAO. And it's a radically new way of doing social organization with a real financial stake.
I noticed that Rowan's had his hand up for a second there. So
oh, yes.
pass the mic to you, Rowan.
Yeah, I was just listening about the DAOs, and I have a couple of questions actually. So I think I've done enough to this, right? So in order to create the DAO itself is basically based on a more complex smart contract. Is that correct?
Sorry, I
Yeah.
was just on mute. Yes. So it's a bit more complicated than that. So yeah, we started this conversation talking about some first version of DAOs, if you like. And the first version of DAOs was it's basically a smart contract. It's a smart contract which people put money in, and there's some voting dynamic with coins that reaches like you'll be able to send those tokens to somewhere else. We've developed actually about 25 smart contracts. It's a smart contract architecture, and we build these modular applications with like governance links between them. So we have some of them that share there's like a crypto economic primitive in the middle that several of these modules share. So yes, in a sense, it's not a smart contract with more functions. It's a protocol of smart contracts. And by picking different bits of these dApps, you can piece together the kind of organization that you want. So legacy DAOs have this very rigid structure because of they're these kind of like monolithic smart contracts. So modular approaches to DAOs is the way forward, I think.
I see. So are there new tools being introduced to create the more DAO specific contracts?
Yes. So we've built tools for launching tokens. So we've got one for auctioning new tokens. We've got that piece for distributing tokens to people. We could pay 1 million people with our bank app, and we can also vest people in it, so it stops people from dumping the tokens of them if they're pre-sale investors. We've got a liquidity mining tool, which is once you've got a liquid token, is that how do you make your market in a decentralized way? So we've got a DAO controlled liquidity mining protocol. And then we've got a governance suite. We call it our second layer governance suite, which has 3 components. We call it influence, proposal, and decision. Influence is like the soft signaling quadratic voting tools. Proposal is where you decide how you're going to do the things that have been signaled. So you make informed proposals, and we capture the contribution to it. And we've got all of this apart from the last bit of that, which is decision, which is a trustless execution layer, which is when you can do that, tie all of these modules together and make it so it's completely trustless. There's no stopping it at that point. It's a decentralized organization. That I'm hoping we get to in Q4. It requires some very complex cryptography, which we're researching into at the moment. But yeah, that's the final piece, I think.
That is, and one last thing for now, at least, the whole income inequality and how these DAOs will help to, or could help to solve that. And real quick, I'll just speak on proof of stake. And I'm new to this, but I have a tech background, so I can read stuff and I have enough background knowledge to understand it. And anyway, the proof of stake, when I first started reading about it, I was like, hold on, this is carrying over inequality into this new world when we have an opportunity to not do that. But you, Dr. Nick, did address that unknowingly just now in that, because in Web3, community participation, in my view, is what's going to make it work. And so if I join a community, there has to be easy ways for me to get enough coins to stake, because that then puts me at a level where it puts me at another potential revenue level. And so people who can afford to stake versus people who can't afford to stake, already there seems like a potential 2-class system. And so in my mind, that has to be accounted for. And what you just said is the simplest way. If there's an algorithm on your site or in your dApp that, and apparently it sounds like there already is these algorithms that exist that will measure your participation. And so even if I don't buy this community token, or if they may have even created a coin, even if I don't buy it, there has to be a reasonable opportunity for me to get enough tokens to be able to stake. And so that therefore I'm not in the permanent class of, because staking right now, the theory is that it'll be just so minuscule, the cost, that anybody should be able to participate. But we know how that works.
Yeah.
How long will
But
that last?
it's almost like you want to balance out maybe people who buy tokens and people who earn tokens with different vesting schemes. But when it comes down
Yes.
to, because usually if you contribute, you take longer to stack enough coins to stake.
Let me jump in, and I'm a few minutes late for a call, so I think this is a great place for me to sign this off, because this point about kind of wealth inequality in the system is like really crucial to this. Many of the dApps we've designed are designed for a fair launch of these tokens. It doesn't. There's a greater chance of more people being able to benefit in the game. So wealth distribution of the tokens is one of the most important aspects of token economics. You want ample opportunity for as many people as possible to get into the token, either by earning it or buying it at a reasonable price, so it's not being pumped to some stupidly high price, which means that everyone's overpaying for it, which means they're just going to get wrecked for like years until the DAO does something. Or so yeah, accurate pricing of the launch price is super important. Ensuring that there isn't people control the game, which you can do with vesting, and making sure that the distribution of the assets is fair and giving them away to, that's very much what we've designed. Proof of stake's slightly different. So proof of stake, there's many things that have staking which don't really need staking, right? Staking is in proof of stake for the Ethereum 2.0 design, for example, is that you're risking that stake to be a validator in the network. And essentially you can get that stake slashed. You can lose it if you behave badly or you don't work as a validator properly. So it's not costless necessarily. And the reason why it's high is because it's simple scaling issues. Eventually, like you say, it will get to the point where much smaller stakes can be fractionalized and you can get into the sort of passive income dynamic of it. But yeah, broadly, I feel that DAOs, I think every major protocol will have a DAO sooner or later. So I think we'll see protocol DAOs turn up, which introduce other people like Ethereum could do one, for example. I don't think it will, but there'll be other protocols of similar ilk that allow people to earn the tokens to get up to a staking amount rather than having to buy in, which would be a great way to develop those networks. But absolutely, the major issues with most token economies at the moment is they're heavily weighted towards either VCs who bought in at the beginning or whales who just bought up a big chunk of it before it was very early days. So wealth inequality. So this just ended Olympus DAO. The inflation was so high that the early stakers ended up with like yacht money, not just boat money, yacht money. And everyone's sitting looking at a liquidity pool, unlocked, so they can dump this at any time. They actually managed to convince each other to keep the game going for ages. But wealth inequality was the problem. It got to the point where 5 or 6 people could just end the game. So, for example, Shiba Inu token, someone bought $5,000 of that and now essentially own a call on $3 billion of Shiba Inu liquidity. So they could literally send the whole thing to zero in one go, take all the liquidity out of it. So this is probably the biggest problem. One of the biggest problems that DAOs have is effective token distribution and all that. I'm afraid I'm going to have to jump off. I'm 7 minutes late for a call, but I enjoyed this, everyone. Apparently, I'm going to be on later on as well, so I'll keep an eye on my feed. See you later, everyone.
See you, Nick. Hey, Rowan, if you ever got a question, happy to take it. If I can answer it, there's enough of it together.
It may be a question and also just a topic for discussion. And so we just touched on inequality. And I happen to be on 49 patents that I barely got paid anything for. And that's written into the employment contracts, pretty much every company on the planet. And it's really hard to fight in court because of the way that they keep records for their patents. So it's extremely hard to trace the specific value to the patent unless it becomes swipe left, swipe type of thing. Believe it or not, that has a patent. And so unless it becomes something like that, for somebody like me, I would literally have to pretty much dedicate the rest of my life to getting paid fairly for the patents that I've contributed. And they're all for of the new digital world, and Web 2 and some for Web 3. And so these patents are worth money, and I have no recourse whatsoever. And so I would like to just breach the topic of, for instance, if there's a DAO where ideas flow and some of them become obviously patentable, the good thing about the DAO is that everything is in the chain. And so I know right now the chain just pretty much tracks transactions, but you can write into your smart contract for other things to be tracked as well. And so I think it's really going to be great for people like me, who I'm a serial innovator. I just solve problems. I don't necessarily have a specialty per se, but anything to do with logic flow, that's my forte. And I'll just be honest, I'm pissed off that we live in a world where we have a system set up where people can just leech off of other people's ideas, and because they have currency, they can then run off with the money that you and your family could have used
Actually,
to
I
live.
have to, sorry for interrupting you. I actually think that DAOs are not immune to this. Even if you put absolutely everything on chain, even if you put transcripts of conversations recorded on Twitter Spaces on chain, I think that the conversations of IP is to be had in DAOs, and DAOs are not immune to people taking ideas that were generated by communities and then someone patenting them or something like this. We actually, a lot of the times I've seen it in like communities coming up, and I don't think DAOs could be immune to this. There could be some maybe interesting ways to ensure against it and timestamp things and have agreements prior to like when it happens. And of course, there is more traceability and more transparency in DAOs as well. But I don't think it's just per se going to be like, I'm pretty sure there will be situations in DAOs soon where someone gonna say, actually, someone with a lot of cash just heard me talking about it in Discord or whatever, and then they went off and did it, and because ideas worth nothing. And I think it's almost like I would like to have, because we have this weekly themes, right? For each week there's a theme. I would like to have a theme sometime, maybe in February, about like ownership and IP and this new ways of conflict resolution. Because actually, like we see a lot of stuff explode in DAOs because there are still things behind the scenes. They're not just perfectly transparent. And I think that I couldn't talk all during the whole call, and now I'm just like blah 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 blah. But yeah, it's almost like I would like this conversation to be had because there are so many questions about how this IP and patents and ideas and collective ownership can work, and what are the potential pitfalls as well.
That would be excellent. I'll come for sure.
Because I don't see, just to summarize, I don't see just because we put everything on the blockchain and we all govern the tokens with votes or whatever, I don't see how these things will just disappear. I think it's just something to be discussed and to be practiced as well, and we'll see how it evolves.
I'll just add this real quick, Finance, if you don't mind. We have all been steeped in capitalism. And so even if I'm a mild capitalist, or even if I think and say I'm an anti-capitalist, which I'm not, I just want better.
It depends to whom
capitalism.
you talk, because some people, if you talk to hardcore ones, you're the mild ones. If you don't to anti, then you're a hardcore one. Yeah, but anyway, sorry, I'm interrupting.
No, just quickly on that, I think just to put this in a bit of like a box, so to speak, right? There isn't the problems that exist in IRL and Web 2 traditional organizations. Web 3 doesn't have a solution to a lot of that yet. It's got like these very entry like tendrils into some sort of like semblance of, oh, we could do this or we could do that. There's a lot of people who just want to recreate the traditional organizations in Web3 and crypto. They just want to basically port everything across and just have it on a blockchain, and that's them. But a lot of this stuff we're talking about, intellectual property, rights, all of these things, they're going to have to be redefined and re-engineered, and then we're going to find new ways of doing these things. If we just port the existing systems, we're just going to recreate the same issues over and over again. So it's
Exactly.
it's this like perpetual conversation, about it. But at the same time, because DAOs are bottom up and not top down, it means everybody's going to have an opportunity to have a say in that conversation versus being dictated to by some philosopher king somewhere about how awesome this way of doing things are. No one has an answer to what you're talking about here, I think, is the major thing. Like, one of the tools we're about to release at Finance, because we just decided literally 2 weeks ago, I was talking to Naomi and I was like, how are we going to capture, we're going to do a competition, and how are we going to capture the information, because we were using like a third party tool which serves a purpose but it's not the ideal solution. And we came up with this idea of having like using influence.vote as a framework and building this tool for capturing people's ideas, and they can sign it with their wallet, so it's not on the blockchain but it is signed with blockchain technology. And that, I think something like that is the very beginning step along on this sort of intellectual property piece, because you can obviously, once you've got multiple people, like an OpenSea, for example, you can see exactly how much the originator is going to get in commission based off every single sale. So if I sell my NFT tomorrow, they're going to get 5% regardless. So there is some mechanisms which can be built. We just don't know what they are, how they're going to work.
Yes. Yeah, and so that's why I bring it up, because I know for a fact it needs to be an open conversation, because I'm not the only one who's been screwed out of intellectual property. And also, I'll put this out there because it's already happening. And as an innovator, I got a vision way back in 2006, 2007, and it was about the experience economy, which we are moving into, but we're moving into it in a kind of weird, funky, chaotic way. And what I mean by experience economy, right now, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram actually own a lot of our intellectual property, and that's our experience. And so I think we're moving into a world where it will be possible for, right now you have influencers, and those are people who have the character, aptitude, personality to be out front. Everybody does not have that. However, everybody has experience, and everybody's experience should be their own intellectual property. And that's even my engagement, my entanglement with my job. We have to have ways of rewarding people for their contribution, just like in Web3. And that's why
I think we lost you. I think you just got rugged by Twitter for like dissing their intellectual property theft. Hey, Jess, I know you do interesting things in crypto land. I don't know if you can talk or not. It'd be interesting to hear what you think about the shape of DAOs at the moment, if you're interested in talking. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to stick your hand up and come up. We've probably got about 10 minutes left, I would say. Yeah, definitely got rugged. Twitter's just pulled him.
I'll need to rug this spaces too in 10 minutes, I think, because I'm hosting and I think I will have to go.
Cool. But yeah, I definitely think you're right, Ksenia, like this having a conversation in the DAO about intellectual property and how that's going to work. I just don't think anybody's got any clear. I think it seems to be like this blanket of kind of like open source somehow fits in there.
Yeah, and I really like your point about the fact that it's not like we have a blueprint for it. It will be like a massive mistake to actually think that we have a clue. It like we're probably going to paint ourselves into a corner if people are going to come out without practicing it, actually saying, "Oh yeah, I have a solution for this," and yeah, so it's almost like it has to evolve through conversations.
Yeah, I think so. Join us on stage.
Yeah, I finished up my meeting and I came right back. This has been, I feel like this is like an underrated space right now. There's been so much good information, and I wish there were like a lot more people in here. I'm curious what everyone thinks is like, how do I put this? We're in a phase right now where like a lot of projects are leveraging Discord as a tool, and there's a website that has the parallax style. There's some people that have DAOs that are leveraging more of a wiki type website. Tool wise, and of course there's the voting mechanisms like Snapshot. Tool wise, what do you think is missing? Because from my background, there's always that one tool to rule them all, like effort that companies do. They try to unify things, but what do you think is a tool that's direly missing that will help us bring DAOs to the next level.
Matrix, I'm like, okay, thanks so much for
You're just
asking it,
giving
because
Ksenia.
you just given me a chance to complain about Discord, and it's pretty much like DAOs are waiting to be rugged by a company based in the US, and you can't even back up a server. If we need to redesign something on the server, we have to just go and start another server and then manually transfer the settings. I mean, what the hell? Seriously, right now it works because everyone is on Discord, but this is definitely not going to be like tool for DAOs. It's just a tool for gamers. Yeah, but this is, I can talk about it for hours. Like we even have this kind of little degoogleization project. Like we're trying to use CryptPad and like testing Skiff and other things that are not, that a bit more ethical and a bit more aligned with like spirit of DAO. I personally really like Matrix. I think everyone will start using it. The problem is because it's federated. Like you don't have to have one server to have a channel between two DAOs. This is pretty powerful. But there's no turnkey solution right now that is like as nice as Discord. But anyway, sounds like almost a separate conversation, and I have to go and feed my kid now.
Yeah, sorry, I brought that a heavy topic up with 10 minutes.
It's a wonderful topic. It's a wonderful topic. Like I think all the DAOs should have this conversation and say, wait a minute, we're using Google Docs and Discord, and we're all like talking about decentralization. This is definitely a conversation to be had on a very serious level. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'll look at Matrix. I'm curious about that. I've never heard of it, but I'll take a look.
NFT, you had your hand up as well. Did you have a question you wanted to ask?
I was going to add to the IP conversation. I also, similar to Rohan who left, I'm in that corporate space to some degree, and I think I want to add in the thought, not the full understanding of how it is, but the thought of when it comes to the IP of a DAO and the contributors of a DAO, I see it more of that tribalism, right? If I make a meme for Shibaku, yeah, I may have made that meme, but I don't own that by any means. It goes back to the NFT and the true ownership. But I feel like part of that IP discussion that then goes to the further deeper discussions of tools and what to use is more of, we're just contributing to the DAO that we choose, that lifestyle. So I hope to see those ownership discussions less towards, I made this, so I should get contributed for it, and more of that owner. We're all contributing into, let's say, Google Sheets. So
yeah,
let's
but
not contribute
that only
into that,
works.
right?
That only works if you don't have rent seeking at all. Once you get rent seeking, then everyone says, wait a minute, this is mine. So it's almost like a balance.
So they have very good thoughts on it as well. I think your child is the future of our generation.
But yeah, I think it's really tough. It depends on the nature of the DAO, right? So people say to me, what is a DAO? And I'm really simple with it. And I just think a DAO is the human layer on top of a blockchain. So the human layer is completely variable, and there are so many different ways that you can abstract that. It depends on the nature of those humans, the mix, all of those things. So and what are people there for? Is it curve, Nick was saying, where it's quite simply crypto economics, you are maximizing yield at all times? Or is it where you're in a DAO and you're the reason that you're there is to make sure DAO survives because you believe in the mission of what the DAO is trying to achieve? So your contribution is it's a completely different mindset. You could be in both DAOs, right? And each DAO requires a completely different mindset and approach to the way that you vote, the way that you work, the way you contribute, communicate. So it's, yeah, I think even probably intellectual property, that's going to just need redefining. Like the word itself, we're going to need to find new language for all of this stuff, because some of it it's so captured that if you use those original wordings, you're going to automatically create paradigms in people's minds which are not appropriate for what we're talking about. So I don't know, like it's a really big conversation, and I think it's an ongoing one for many years to come. But I think we'll probably let Ksenia go and deal with the baby, and we'll call this session a wrap. But if anybody has any questions, now's the moment, and otherwise we'll wrap it up. Take it, that's it. Cool. No worries. Yeah, so later on, Nick and I are going to be in the Sketchy Ape Book Club Discord, and we're going to do like an introduction to DAOs for those guys. So if anybody's interested in joining, yeah, if you look on Twitter for Sketchy Ape Book Clubs, you'll find the Discord link. And you can join us there if you want to ask us more questions and go a bit deeper in these things. Look forward to it. So thanks for coming, everyone. Really appreciate your time. Oh, Rowan, you're back. You finished from getting rugged, and it's good to see you got back on. Cool. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate your time.